Late autumn had draped San Francisco in a soft chill. Golden leaves drifted along cobblestone sidewalks as the breeze whispered through rows of brownstone buildings. From the 42nd floor of Walker Point, the headquarters of one of the fastest-growing edtech startups in the country, dim office lights glowed behind towering glass windows, echoing the last light slipping over the bay. Ethan Walker, 35, sat behind a walnut desk, arms folded, eyes fixed on a quarterly report glowing on his screen. Revenue up 18%. Profits surpassed projections. And yet, his expression didn't shift, not even a flicker of excitement. Once dubbed the visionary redefining digital education, Ethan had built an empire. But after nearly a decade, the numbers no longer thrilled him. Every win felt like just another box to check. A sharp buzz from his desk phone broke the silence. The name Ryan Tran lit up. Ethan's brow furrowed. After a moment's pause, he picked up. Ethan speaking. "Ethan, buddy, I need a lifeline here!" Ryan's voice burst through, like a man trying to save the world with one phone call. "Save you from what?" Ethan replied flatly, already exasperated. "Tonight's date. I've got an emergency trip to Seattle, but I promised a friend I'd be there. If I cancel, she'll think I stood her up. Please, man, just take my place. One dinner. She's sweet, I swear." Ethan sighed, rubbing his forehead as if feeling a headache swell. "You know I don't have time for this." "It's just dinner. Talk a little, eat a little, go home. No expectations. She's a youth counselor, really genuine. You might even, dare I say, might enjoy yourself. Please?" Ethan stood and walked to the window. The city shimmered below, light pooling across the Bay Bridge. But inside him, nothing stirred, just silence and a familiar, aching emptiness. A memory surfaced, a rainy night 3 years ago, and the cold goodbye from Vanessa, the woman he once thought was forever. Since then, he had buried himself in work, behind walls no one could breach. Ryan was one of the few who still tried. "Why should I do this?" Ethan asked, voice cool but wavering. "Because I'm your friend, and because you need to stop hiding in that glass tower. Her name's Sophie Grant. She works at a teen outreach center. Funny, honest, just one night, I'll owe you big." Silence lingered. Ethan hated blind dates, the fake laughter, stiff questions, the exhausting effort to be someone impressive. But Ryan was relentless, and deep down, Ethan knew he needed a reason, any reason, to step out of this empty routine. "Fine," he muttered. "One time? When and where?" "Reverie Cafe, 7 p.m. tomorrow. I'll send you her photo. You're a hero, man." "You owe me," Ethan replied, and hung up. He sank back into his chair. The room around him was modern and immaculate. High-end art, curated furniture, perfect. The office was perfect, and completely lifeless, like everything else in his world. His phone buzzed. A new message from Ryan. A photo. A young woman with a high ponytail, earthy sweater, and a radiant smile. She stood among a group of kids, arms mid-gesture, clearly mid-laugh. Below the image, "Sophie Grant, youth counselor, a little crazy, extremely kind. You'll like her." Ethan stared at the photo. Something about her smile tugged faintly at him. Not curiosity exactly. Something quieter, something almost forgotten. He brushed it off. Just one night. He switched off the lights and stepped into the hallway. Outside, the city gleamed, alive and restless. But inside Ethan, it was still cold, still quiet. Just a man watching the world go by from behind the glass. The following afternoon, San Francisco was bathed in the soft gold of late sunlight, casting long shadows across tree-lined streets. Ethan stepped out of his sleek black SUV, his driver giving a polite nod before pulling away. He adjusted the collar of his coat and paused at a busy intersection. It was supposed to be just a dinner, nothing more, but the strange flutter in his chest made him uneasy. Part of him wanted to turn back. Instead, his feet carried him forward toward the cafe as if on instinct. Reverie Cafe was only a few blocks away. Ethan decided to walk, hoping the brisk air and familiar cityscape would quiet his nerves. The wind whispered past red brick buildings and cozy shop fronts with golden window light. Ethan, dressed in a tailored charcoal coat and slim tie, stood out from the crowd. Yet no one approached him. His composed, icy demeanor acted as a quiet force field. As he turned a corner, a sharp voice rang out. "This isn't a suitcase, sir. It's a medical supply bag. Charging extra for that? What's next? Breathing fees?" Ethan slowed. A young woman stood firm, high ponytail swaying as she faced off with a scowling food delivery driver. She crossed her arms, her stance unapologetic. "If you're not paying, then walk," the man barked. Before he realized it, Ethan stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" Both heads turned. The man grumbled something and looked away. The woman glanced at Ethan, her eyes sharp but amused. "Wow, a street night in a wool coat," she said. "I'm fine. The guy thought I had an entire clinic in this bag." There was something about the way she stood, confident but playful, that gave him pause. Ethan pulled out his wallet and handed the man a $100 bill. "Is that enough? Keep the change." The driver muttered thanks and hurried off. The woman folded her arms and looked at Ethan, a half-grateful, half-challenging glint in her eyes. "Thanks, but I don't need rescuing. I can pay my own way. I just don't like being ripped off." "No problem," Ethan replied coolly. "Let's say I saved both of us some time." He turned to leave, but her voice caught him mid-step. "Wait, let me guess. You're the stand-in date for tonight, aren't you?" He turned back. She grinned, eyes sparkling with mischief. This had to be Sophie Grant. High ponytail, lively, intelligent eyes, that bold, open smile. Exactly like the photo Ryan had sent. "Sophie?" he asked, keeping his composure. "Bingo," she said, clapping once. "And you must be Ethan Walker, the famously overbooked guy with a secretly decent heart. That's what Ryan told me. Now come on, I'm starving, and from what I hear, Reverie doesn't do fashionably late." She started walking, not waiting for a reply, as if they were old friends. Ethan hesitated, caught off guard, then followed. His leather shoes tapped steadily against the pavement. He wasn't used to people like Sophie, open, direct, and seemingly uninterested in who he was. A quiet voice in his mind warned, "She's different. Be careful." But he ignored it. It was just one night. Nothing more. Reverie Cafe wasn't the kind of place Ethan usually visited. There were no glossy tabletops or embossed menus. Instead, it was small, intimate. Golden lights glowed softly, and the scent of freshly ground coffee lingered in the air. Sophie chose a table by the window where the glow from a nearby street lamp filtered through gauzy curtains. She didn't need to look at the menu. "I've been here too many times," she said, chin propped on her hand. "But you still look like you're choosing between fleeing or enduring." Ethan set his menu down, his lips curved just slightly. "I'm choosing to endure," Sophie laughed, a clear, genuine sound that made a few heads turn. "Honest? I like that. I hate pretense. So, Ethan Walker, $1 million startup founder, non-dating type? Why should I go easy on you tonight?" He tilted his head, studying her more closely. Sophie Grant wasn't striking because of appearance. It was the energy she carried. Open, unaffected, refreshingly real. "Maybe because I just paid $100 for your rage," Ethan replied. "Point for you," she smirked. "I work at a teen outreach center in the Mission District. The kids call me Miss Knows Everything Sophie. But really, I just know how to listen. You? Teaching the next Zuckerberg since age 15? Ethan nodded slightly. We build platforms to teach digital skills to under-resourced students. Started small. Now it's on Forbes. Yeah, I know, Sophie cut in, but without false awe. Her tone was more curious than impressed. But does it make you happy? A simple question, but Ethan paused. He thought of his office, the late nights, the contracts worth millions. And yet, the void remained. I used to think so, he admitted slowly. Lately, I'm not sure. Sophie smiled, not pitying but knowing, like she understood something most people overlooked. Feels like climbing a really tall mountain only to find fog at the top, right? Ethan looked at her. For the first time on any date, he didn't feel like performing. No careful words, no masked version of himself. The waiter arrived. Sophie ordered the honey-glazed roast chicken. Ethan chose the salmon partly to see her reaction. Salmon? She teased, eyebrows raised. Let me guess, your meals are scheduled to the minute? I like structure, he said. And I live on feeling, Sophie replied. My rule, do your best, love with your whole heart, and never let your coffee go cold. Ethan chuckled, a soft sound, but real. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like that on a date. Sophie talked about her job, overnight shifts, teens confiding in her at 3 a.m., a little girl who once gave her a crayon drawing full of misspellings, or the time she got in trouble for letting a student sleep at the center because he was too afraid to go home. Her voice shifted as she spoke, sometimes playful, sometimes quiet and thoughtful. Ethan listened, not out of politeness, but because he genuinely wanted to know her world. You know, Sophie said as dessert arrived, I thought you'd be the type to micromanage life and keep everyone out, but you've got a kind smile. Ethan froze for a heartbeat. His wine glass trembled slightly in his hand. A simple compliment, but so sincere it caught him off guard. Under the soft golden lights, with jazz murmuring in the background and a wall lined with vintage books behind them, Ethan Walker, the man who always knew what he wanted, suddenly wasn't sure of anything. Except this. He didn't want this night to end too soon. They left the cafe after dark. The air had turned colder and soft flurries began to fall, the season's first snow. San Francisco rarely saw snow like this, but tonight was different. Quiet, magical. Ethan and Sophie walked side by side along the cobbled street, their steps echoing under the soft yellow streetlights that reflected off the damp pavement. I thought tonight would be awkward and dull, Ethan said, hands in his coat pockets. And I thought you'd walk out after 10 minutes, Sophie replied, her voice light. They both laughed. A quiet harmony was forming between them. I really appreciate how you listen, she said after a pause. Most people just wait for their turn to speak? Ethan turned to her. Her face shimmered in the light, cheeks rosy from the cold. I never thought a date could feel peaceful. They stopped beneath a street lamp, its glow casting a soft circle on the snowy sidewalk. No traffic noise, only the wind and the faint rhythm of two hearts. Sophie held out her palm, catching a snowflake. Sometimes I think little things like this are the most beautiful parts of life. Ethan nodded slowly. His throat tightened. Words weren't his strength, but this stillness between them said everything. He stepped closer, only inches now. Sophie, he said quietly. She looked up. Her brown eyes were steady, unflinching. If you're going to kiss me, she whispered, teasing but gentle, don't overthink it. He didn't. Ethan leaned in and kissed her, soft but full of feeling, like something long buried inside him had finally found air. Sophie kissed him back, one hand resting lightly on his chest. The world around them faded. There was only this moment, this hush, this warmth in the middle of falling snow. Then, ping. The sound from Ethan's coat pocket shattered the silence. He pulled away, still catching his breath, and checked his phone. On screen, message from unknown number. A photo appeared, the two of them, mid-kiss under the lamp, taken from afar. Below the image, 5 million or this goes public by morning. Ethan froze. The cold wasn't from the weather anymore. He looked at Sophie, forcing calm. "You should see this." She glanced at the phone, then laughed. "Wow, paparazzi are fast these days. But 5 million? I'm flattered." Ethan didn't laugh. His eyes were full of worry. "I don't care about me. I'm worried about you." Sophie nodded, then kept walking as if nothing had happened. "Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide. What about you? Scandal shy?" Ethan matched her pace, his voice low but steady. "I'm not afraid, but I won't let anyone hurt you." She stopped and took his hand. "Then we face it, together. I'm not a damsel in distress, but I like having a teammate." Ethan gently squeezed her hand. Under the soft glow of the street lamp, with snow swirling around them, neither of them knew what storm was coming, only that this time they wouldn't be facing it alone. Beneath the quiet glow of the street lamp, with Sophie's hand wrapped in his, Ethan had no idea what waited ahead. All he knew was that the sweetness of this moment wouldn't last, because his past had never allowed peace to linger. And just hours later, everything began to shift. Ethan sat in silence inside his penthouse apartment. The warm glow from the desk lamp reflected against his phone screen, the threatening message still open. The kiss, the photo, the cold demand, $5 million. Or the image goes to the press by morning. Ethan wasn't worried about himself. He'd faced headlines, corporate crises, lawsuits worse than this. But Sophie? She didn't live in his world of clickbait and manipulation. She helped people. She worked from a place of honesty. He couldn't drag her into the ugliness of his life. He opened his contacts and tapped a name. "David," he said once the line picked up, "I need you to trace an anonymous message I just received. Urgent. There's a photo attached. I'll forward it now." He sent the message with strict instructions. Track the sender. Fast. Keep Sophie's name out of everything. No leaks. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. By morning, he sat at his breakfast table, soft sunlight falling through white curtains. His phone buzzed. Sophie. "Morning, Iceman," her voice teased through the receiver. "Planning to flee the city after last night?" He smiled, though his chest was tight. "Not exactly, but we need to talk." "I figured," she said, quieter now. "I'm not naive. I know that photo could stir up chaos. But Ethan, I don't panic over gossip columns." "I know you're strong," he said slowly. "But you shouldn't have to be. The picture, the message, they weren't aimed at me. They were aimed at you." "Then let's face it," she replied firmly. "I'm not running." That afternoon, they met at a park near the youth center where Sophie worked. The air was crisp. Fallen leaves blanketed benches and paths. Sophie arrived first, wearing a beige coat and brown scarf, her expression calm. When Ethan approached, she greeted him with a faint smile. "You didn't bring 3 men in black suits with you?" "Didn't need to," he replied, sitting beside her. "You've got enough backbone for both of us." They laughed softly. Then came silence. Ethan pulled out his phone and reopened the photo. "If this breaks," he said, "everything you've built, your work, your reputation, it could all be put under a microscope." "So what?" Sophie looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not ashamed. I kissed someone I like, on a street, in the snow. Sounds more beautiful than scandalous to me." Ethan stared at her, finding not fear in her eyes, but something stronger. Belief. He reached for her hand and held it gently. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to protect. Sophie didn't need saving. She needed to be trusted. "I'll find out who sent this," he said, "and I promise you won't go through it alone." Good, Sophie nodded, because I have no plans of backing down. A gust of wind scattered leaves along the path. In the stillness that followed, Ethan realized something important. That kiss under the snow wasn't the problem. It was the beginning, and he wasn't afraid anymore. After Sophie left the park, Ethan remained seated on the bench, dusk settling softly over his shoulders. Her words echoed in his mind. I'm not ashamed. He had met many bold people in his life, partners, investors, risk-takers who gambled millions on a single pitch. But no one had ever made him feel as small, as humbled as Sophie did. Not because she shouted, but because she stood so still, so certain. She hadn't flinched when pulled into his world's mess. She didn't ask for protection or pity. She simply stood beside him, ready to walk through the storm. Ethan wondered, if it were him being exposed, could he face the world and say, I've got nothing to hide? In his world, everything was controlled. Curated press kits, polished appearances, scheduled narratives. But Sophie, she lived in truth. And that scared him, not because he might lose her, but because he might not deserve her. A breeze passed through the trees, last of the season leaves tumbling at his feet. Ethan stood, pulled out his phone, and typed a message. I want to see where you work, to understand you, your world. And that was how he decided to cross the line, out of his glass fortress and into the place where her heart truly belonged. The Mission Community Center was tucked inside an old 3-story brick building with a faded red exterior. The hand-painted sign above the door was chipped but clear. Hope House, where unheard voices are heard. Ethan stood in front of the iron gate, his heart thudding softly as if he were stepping into a world he didn't understand. And he was. This wasn't a place built for CEOs with expensive watches and back-to-back meetings. But Sophie had texted him. Art class today. The kids would love it if you came. So he came. She greeted him at the front door, smiling wide, her sleeves stained with green paint. You actually showed up. I won the bet with the kids. What did you bet on? That you wouldn't run away after 3 minutes. They both laughed, and Ethan followed her inside. The hallway was lined with children's art, messy, bright, and brimming with stories. From a nearby room drifted the smell of fresh-baked cookies. Sophie led him into a large, open room where about a dozen kids sat at scattered tables, crayons, paper, glue sticks, and markers spread everywhere. Everyone, Sophie called, we have a special guest today. Is it Miss Sophie's boyfriend? A girl around 10 shouted, making the room erupt in giggles. Ethan flushed. Sophie, unfazed, replied, Not a boyfriend, just a friend trying to understand our world. No further explanation was needed. The kids pulled out a chair for him, shoved a crayon into his hand, and within minutes, Ethan, the man who'd spoken at international tech summits, was drawing a 3-legged cat on a wrinkled piece of paper. At one point, a boy leaned against Sophie's shoulder, dozing off after class, and something inside Ethan clenched. Not out of pity, but because for the first time he saw safety in a child's eyes. After class, Sophie gave him a tour. She showed him each room, the life skills corner, the little reading nook lit with warm lamps, the tiny kitchen where they cooked together on weekends. Nothing fancy, she said, but the kids know it's theirs. A place to belong, Ethan murmured. Sophie paused and looked at him. Exactly. They don't need perfection. They just need to know they're not forgotten. Her words struck deep. Ethan thought of his teenage years, empty, quiet, defined by numbers and solitude, orphaned early, raised by goals. He turned to her. You've created something an entire system failed to do. Sophie shrugged. I just do my small part. The rest depends on trust. Their eyes met in a quiet moment. No words were spoken, but it was clear. Something between them had shifted. And when Ethan stepped out of the center that afternoon, he understood. Sophie's world wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a place he now wanted to return to. That night, the gala venue shimmered in the city's heart, lit by 1,000 lights. Ethan stood outside in a dark gray suit, waiting. He wasn't nervous about the event. He was nervous about her. Sophie stepped out of the car, a black fitted dress skimming her frame, hair cascading gently, her lips painted a quiet, confident red. She wasn't trying to impress, and that's what made everyone turn to look. "You," Ethan began, slightly breathless. "Don't say it," she grinned. "I know I look all right." He extended his hand. She took it. For the first time, Ethan walked into a public space, not alone. The ballroom gleamed with chandeliers and chatter. A string quartet played softly. Servers in white moved through the crowd with glasses of champagne. But Ethan saw only Sophie. She blended effortlessly, even if this wasn't her world. She spoke to a donor about the children at her center, plainly, honestly, and left him blinking, visibly moved. Ethan stood back, watching. He had never been prouder of anyone. Then came the sound he hadn't heard in over a year. Sharp heels, confident, calculated, familiar. Vanessa Rhodes, ex-girlfriend, former co-founder. The woman he walked away from when he realized ambition wasn't enough to fill the silence in his life. She entered like a cold gust on a summer night, in a deep red dress, lips to match, eyes sharp as glass. And when her gaze landed on Ethan, and then on Sophie, her smile turned razor thin. "Ethan," she cooed, all sugar-laced steel. "Didn't expect to see you here. And this must be your new assistant?" The room seemed to pause. Sophie didn't flinch. She met Vanessa's stare head-on. "Sophie Grant," she said, offering her hand. "Not an assistant. I work at the Mission Community Center." Vanessa took her hand, too firmly, too cold. Testing. "Ah, social work, that's admirable. Charity is always a safe path for people not cut out for the real game." Ethan tightened his grip on Sophie's hand. He opened his mouth, but Sophie was already stepping forward. "I believe kindness is the most luxurious choice of all, regardless of class." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Her fake sweetness disappeared. "You really chose this type of woman?" "I chose the one who makes me want to be better," Ethan said, calmly but clearly. The tension in the air hummed like a wire pulled too tight. Vanessa chuckled softly, but her eyes remained cold. "Well then, good luck. You'll need more than that." She turned, heels clicking like punctuation, swallowed by a crowd already whispering. Ethan looked at Sophie. She didn't seem shaken, but he knew. Every word had been a blade wrapped in velvet. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine," she said, then turned to him. "I'm not afraid of women like her. I just need to know you won't flinch when the wind picks up." Ethan took her hand again, and this time he didn't just hold it. He gripped it firmly, not to protect her, but to show her he wasn't going anywhere. They stood in silence for a moment, her hand still in his. The music, the lights, the noise, all blurred into the background. Ethan wanted to say something, to make it better, but instead he held on. And for now, that was enough. The morning after the gala, Sophie woke with a strange tightness in her chest, a nameless unease. She made her coffee, checked her phone, and her heart sank. An anonymous message, just a single link, no explanation. She clicked. The screen lit up with a tabloid headline. "Ethan Walker's social worker girlfriend, a convenient cover for internal scandal?" Below the headline were photos of her at the community center, handing out supplies to the unhoused, and worse, a clipped, manipulated video that made it look like she was accepting shady donations. Each frame felt like a sharp blade, and then Another message, also anonymous. Are you sure Ethan didn't know about this before it leaked? Sophie put down her coffee. Her hands were trembling slightly. She didn't want to believe it. But once trust is reminded of its fragility, it begins to shake. She didn't think Ethan was a liar, but he came from a world where truth was sometimes buried beneath layers of media teams, PR filters, and legal shielding. A world where even silence could be weaponized. And all morning, he hadn't called. Not a word. That evening, the center was quieter than usual. Sophie sat alone in the reading room, warm lamplight resting on her shoulders and the half-read pages of an open book. A soft knock at the door. Ethan stepped in. "I saw the article," she said before he could speak. Ethan nodded, his expression heavy. "I saw it too. My comms team sent it to me this morning." "And you thought it best to say nothing?" The question wasn't an accusation. It was the quiet voice of someone who felt forgotten. "I just wanted to verify the facts before worrying you," Ethan said gently. "I don't need you to shield me with silence," she replied, eyes fixed on the lamp. "I just need to know I'm a real part of your life, not a footnote you leave behind when trouble shows up." He stepped closer, but she stood. The space between them suddenly felt endless. "To me, silence feels like avoidance," Sophie continued, "like the way your world hides from real emotion." Ethan was at a loss. This wasn't a negotiation or boardroom logic. No reasoning could fix the hurt in her voice. "I don't always know how to handle feelings properly," he admitted. "I'm used to fixing things, to acting. But you don't need a fixer. You need someone who shows up." Sophie looked up at him. Her brown eyes weren't angry. They were deep, searching, waiting for him to meet her where it mattered. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and opened his email. He handed it to her. There was a long thread from that morning between him and his team. In it were urgent instructions: trace the leak, stop the story from spreading, protect her name and reputation. "I didn't know how to say this," he said slowly, "but everything I've done today, it was for you. Not because you're weak, but because you matter." Sophie looked from the screen to his face. The armor around her softened. "Then why didn't you just call me?" Ethan gave a sad smile. "Because I was afraid you'd think I only call when you become a liability." Silence. Then Sophie stepped closer. "I don't need you to be perfect, Ethan. I need you to be honest, even if you're scared, even if you don't know what to do. I just need to know. You won't disappear when things get hard." He nodded, then gently reached for her hand. "I'm not going anywhere, no matter what the media says, no matter how long this lasts. I'm here, not to soothe it all away, but to walk through it with you." Sophie rested her head on his shoulder, exhaling. Not all the doubt was gone. But for the first time, in a world spinning out of control, she didn't feel alone. Ethan said nothing more after that night. No more explanations. No attempts to clean up the situation like he usually did in a crisis. Instead, he did something he had never done before. He stayed quiet to listen, and acted without needing recognition. The next morning, he called in his private legal team, bypassing the company's legal department entirely. Every data point, call log, and leak trail between Vanessa and the press was quietly tracked and documented. The process was silent but airtight. He had no desire to drag Vanessa into a scandal. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because Sophie didn't deserve another wave of media chaos. Quiet, efficient, final. That was how Ethan chose to end the past that had once hurt the woman he loved. 3 days later, Vanessa received a brief legal notice. "We are fully aware of the source of the misinformation. This is your final warning." Not a single mention of Sophie. She was no longer the target. The matter was closed, just as quietly as it had once exploded. But Ethan didn't stop there. Late one Thursday night, while the city lay under a blanket of fog, he sat alone in his office, not reviewing contracts or analyzing quarterly growth. On the screen before him was the draft for a new scholarship initiative, the Sophie Grant Foundation, dedicated to funding life skills education for underserved youth. No launch ceremony, no gold-plated plaque, just a small sign to hang inside the community center where everything began. Ethan didn't need anyone to know who was behind it. He only needed Sophie to know she had changed him, from the inside out, quietly, unconditionally. That night he texted her, no flowery language, no excuses. "I can't change the mistakes I've made before, but I'm learning how not to repeat them. And this time, I'm choosing not to disappear." A minute later, Sophie replied, "I never expected you to be perfect. I just hoped you'd be real. And this time, I can feel that you are." Ethan smiled. Sometimes healing doesn't come from promises. It comes from choosing to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. 1 week later, the Mission Community Center hosted a small ceremony to inaugurate their new life skills classroom. Sophie wore a soft blue dress, hair tied up, her smile never leaving her face. She didn't know Ethan had arrived early. No security, no CEO name tag. Just a man standing at the back row, quietly watching her. When the event coordinator announced the new name of the classroom, Life Skills Room, the Sophie Grant Fund, the room fell silent for a moment. Sophie turned, stunned. Her eyes shimmered, lips parting slightly in disbelief. She hadn't heard a word about it before, and yet it spoke straight to her heart. The coordinator smiled warmly. "An anonymous donor has fully funded our life skills program for local teens, inspired by the kindness Miss Sophie has shared for years." Sophie looked around. She didn't see Ethan, until he stepped forward from the back, calm, unannounced. No grand entrance, no spotlight. Only their eyes locking across the room, and a single nod, so quiet, yet louder than 1,000 words. One simple nod that carried everything: apology, respect, trust, and the one thing they both had finally learned to admit: love. Then she pulled him close and kissed him, right there beneath the falling snow. Their hands locked, and for the first time, they looked forward, not to perfection, but to something real, built on trust, love, and the kind of quiet strength that lasts.